or obsession over large ships. There's just something about a 60,000 ton ship the size of the Eiffel Tower that floats on this open body of water that freaks me out, but yet fascinates me so much that I decided to watch almost every documentary over the Titanic. The Titanic was a cruise ship set to sail from Southampton, England to New York. It was struck by an iceberg in the Atlantic Ocean and resulted in over 1,500 casualties. And like previously stated, I found an interest in watching and reading all about ships. And after many hours of internet research and documentary watching, I finally feel comfortable enough providing you with information about this topic. Today I just want to talk about 3 events of the Titanic. To begin, I'll inform you a little bit about the ship and why they're heading to New York. After explaining why they were on the ship, I'll discuss what exactly caused the sinking of the ship and how it possibly could have been prevented. I'll then conclude the speech with going over the casualties and why there could have been a lot less. The Titanic was built by a company called White Star Line, and according to E.S. Zingler, it cost roughly $7.5 million to make. It set sail from England April 10th, 1912, and was carrying over 2,200 passengers and crew members to New York. The Titanic's full title is actually the RMS Titanic. RMS stands for Royal Mail Steamer, and shipping lines actually made more money by carrying mail through the sectors of New York and London than it did with passengers. There were 855 crew members on board. 88% of women crew members survived, and just 22% of male crew members survived, according to Titanic Facts. As you can see, there were 4 large smokestack funnels on the Titanic. 3 that were operational, and the first one that was strictly just for looks. The purpose for smokestack funnels were to allow smoke, heat, and extra steam escape from the boilers. And funnels were supposed to be symbolic for power and safety, which is why a lot of shipping companies made false funnels like this one to give the impression that their ship is powerful and it is safe. So after explaining a little bit about the ship and why they were and where it was going, I'd now like to talk to you about the iceberg that caused the ship to sink and how that possibly could have been prevented. The Titanic struck the iceberg in the Atlantic Ocean the evening of April 14th and finally sunk the morning of April 15th. The iceberg that struck the Titanic was unusual in a way because it wasn't white like normal icebergs. It was more clear, caused by the continuous melting, which made it reflect the water in dark sky like a mirror, so making it almost impossible to see from a distance. Icebergs only show 1/10 of its mass above water, with the other 9/10 underwater, making it almost impossible to budge. There were many things going on that night that affected the collision, and one of them, there were 6 warnings sent to the Titanic about the iceberg that were all 6 ignored by the wireless operator. And since the moon was not out and we know that the water was still the night of the collision, it was very difficult to spot the iceberg. A less calm water would have caused breakers around the iceberg, making it invisible to see from a distance. One crew member actually did spot the iceberg, but since the Titanic was going at a speed of 22 knots, it actually gave the Titanic, no chance. Like all ships, it would have turned more quickly the greater its forward motion. Therefore, if the Titanic would have just kept straight and then tried to turn without slowing down, it would have missed the Titanic altogether. The sinking of the Titanic resulted in 1,503 casualties and just 705 survivors. And as seen in the documentary Case Closed, 300 dead bodies were pulled from sea the next morning, and only a small margin of people actually went down with the ship. Majority died and then later on drifted away. And the leading cause of death was actually the freezing cold temperatures. Only one man survived the freezing cold Atlantic water, and according to JSO Online, he reportedly had been drinking very heavily that night. So, the captain ordered that women and children were to board the lifeboats first. There were 1,178 lifeboat seats, and they needed 2,208 lifeboat seats that night. The first lifeboat to leave the ship carried only 28 people and could have fit a total of 64, and there were 472 lifeboat seats that were not used that night. And according to Julian Champion from Significance, she had a theory that maybe there could have been more survivors if the women and children first principle would have been abandoned. An officer in the port side of the strip was very strict about this principle, making it so there were very few male passengers getting on board. Whereas on the starboard side, the officer helping was more flexible. He wasn't wasting valuable time searching for women and children who weren't around. There were 461 people who got off on the starboard side, and there were just over 350 to get off on the port side. So after going through I forgot about that. Sorry. Well, those are the smokestack funnels that I previously talked about. And after going through 3 main events over the sinking of the Titanic, I want to conclude this speech hoping that you guys gained as much useful information about one of the worst tragedies of its time as I did. Now you are aware about the facts and why people were aboard the ship. In addition, you now know what caused the Titanic to sink and how it could have been prevented. And lastly, we went over the casualties and how they also could have been prevented. And as you can see over here, this is the picture of the iceberg that actually hit the Titanic. The person that photographed this, he was the steward of Prince Alderbert. If anyone can pronounce that better, go ahead. But he actually did not know about the Titanic sinking until a couple days later. He just took it because of the red smear that was going across it. So I found that kind of interesting. So after this speech, I still have no desire to ever step foot on ship. Thank you.